The first snow of winter fell like a silent shroud over our secluded cabin in the depths of the Minnesota wilderness. Inside, I hummed a soft lullaby, cradling my 3-month-old daughter Lily in my arms. The gentle rhythm of the rocking chair creaked in time with my melody, a soothing counterpoint to the whisper of wind through the pines outside. My husband Daniel knelt by the fireplace, carefully arranging logs to feed the hungry flames that danced and crackled, battling against the encroaching cold. We had chosen this life of solitude, miles from the nearest town, a world away from the ceaseless noise and bustle of civilization. It wasn't an easy choice, especially with a newborn, but it felt right. Here, surrounded by the raw beauty of nature, we could raise our daughter in harmony with the land, teaching her the value of simplicity and the wonders of the wild. The storm's worsening, Daniel murmured, rising from his crouch to peer through the frosted window. Outside, the wind had picked up, thrashing the tall pines that surrounded our little haven. Snowflakes swirled in dizzying patterns, obscuring the world beyond our walls. I should check the generator before it gets too dark. We can't risk losing power tonight. I nodded, gently placing Lily in her handcrafted wooden crib, a gift from Daniel's father. I pulled a soft knitted blanket over her tiny form, marveling as always at her perfect fingers, her rosebud lips, the wisp of golden hair that crowned her head. Be quick, I said, unable to shake off a prickle of unease that crawled up my spine. Something feels different tonight. Daniel paused, his hand on his coat. He turned to me, his brow furrowed with concern. Different how, Emma? I shook my head, struggling to put the feeling into words. I don't know, it's just a feeling. Like the air's charged, somehow. Like something's about to happen. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, enveloping me in a warm embrace. I breathed in his familiar scent, pine, smoke, and something uniquely Daniel. Hey, he said softly, his breath tickling my ear. We're safe here. You, me, and Lily. Nothing can touch us. I nodded against his chest, wanting to believe him. But as he released me and reached again for his coat, that feeling of unease refused to dissipate. Living in these woods for the past 2 years had taught me to trust my instincts. Nature was beautiful, yes, but also unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. We respected it, lived in harmony with it as best we could, but we never forgot its power. As Daniel's hand touched the doorknob, an unnatural silence descended. The wind, which had been howling relentlessly, vanished in an instant. The forest beyond our walls felt eerily quiet. Every bird call ceased, every rustle of branch against branch silenced. A chill deeper than the winter air gripped me, raising goosebumps along my arms. Daniel's hand froze on the doorknob. Did you hear that? He whispered, his voice barely audible. I strained my ears, heart pounding in my chest. At first there was nothing but the soft crackle of the fire. Then, carried on the still air, I caught it, a low rumble, almost a whimper. Not the mournful cry of a wolf, not the haunting screech of an owl, but something larger, more desperate. Probably just the wind, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. His eyes darted to the rifle mounted above the door, a precaution we had hoped never to need. Before he could reach for it, a heavy thud shook the cabin wall. The sound reverberated through the room, causing the flames in the fireplace to dance wildly. Lily stirred in her crib, but mercifully didn't wake. The thud came again, followed by a deep, rumbling groan that sent ice through my veins. There was no mistaking that sound. Bear! I rushed to the window, my heart hammered against my ribs. Through the swirling snow, barely visible in the fading light, stood a massive creature. A bear. Larger than any I had ever seen, balanced on its hind legs with one enormous paw raised against our cabin wall. But it wasn't alone. Behind it, huddled together for warmth, were 2 smaller forms. Cubs, vulnerable and shivering in winter's merciless grip. "Daniel!" I whispered, unable to tear my eyes from the scene unfolding outside. "It's a mother bear!" With 2 cubs. Daniel joined me at the window, his face pale in the firelight. "There's another," he said, his voice tight as he pointed to the tree line. My stomach lurched as I followed his gaze. Emerging from the shadows of the forest came a second bear, smaller than the first but still formidable. It moved with a slight limp, and behind it trailed a single cub, its gait uneven and pained. We watched, stunned into silence, as the larger bear lowered herself back to all fours and approached our door. But she didn't scratch at the wood or growl in threat. Instead, she simply sat in the snow, her cubs pressed against her massive form, and stared at the door with an almost human-like patience. The smaller bear joined her, guiding its injured cub to sit beside the others. It was a strange, almost surreal gathering on our doorstep. like something out of a fairy tale. What do they want? I whispered, clutching Daniel's arm. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was dangerous, that we should be barricading the doors and windows. But another part, a deeper, more instinctive part, sensed something else at play here. Before Daniel could answer, a startled cry pierced the night. Lily had woken, perhaps disturbed by the tension in the air or the strange sounds outside her window. As my baby's cries echoed through the cabin, something truly unbelievable happened. The larger mother bear tilted her head, her ears perking up at the sound. Then, as we watched in disbelief, she let out a soft, almost gentle moan, a sound that eerily mirrored Lily's cries. In that moment, understanding washed over me like a wave. These weren't random bears seeking shelter from the storm. They had come deliberately, drawn by something more powerful than hunger or threat. They had come with a purpose. Daniel, I said softly, my eyes locked on the bears outside. I think they need our help. Daniel's grip on the window frame tightened, his knuckles white with tension. Emma, he said, his voice strained. They're wild animals. Bears, do you understand what you're saying? I moved away from the window, crossing the room to check on Lily. Her cries had softened to whimpers, but she was clearly distressed. As I leaned over the crib, murmuring soothing words, the larger mother bear outside moaned again, the sound carrying clearly through the walls of our cabin. Listen to that, I whispered, looking back at Daniel. She's responding to Lily. Have you ever heard of bears behaving this way? Daniel ran his fingers through his hair, a sure sign of stress. No, he admitted, but that doesn't make them any less dangerous. Emma, they could kill us all in seconds if they wanted to. I picked up Lily, cradling her close to my chest. The baby's cries softened further as she felt my warmth, her tiny fingers curling into the fabric of my sweater. Look at them, Daniel, I urged. Really look. They're not acting aggressive. They're waiting. Reluctantly, Daniel returned his gaze to the window. The snow was falling heavier now, almost obscuring our view. But the bears remained, their dark forms stark against the white landscape. The injured cub whimpered, trying to put weight on its hurt paw, only to quickly lift it again. The smaller mother bear gently nudged it back down, licking the wound with tender care. The little one is hurt, I said, joining Daniel at the window with Lily in my arms. And look how thin they all are. Bears should be hibernating by now, not wandering in a snowstorm. Something must have happened to disturb their den. Daniel's voice softened slightly, a note of concern creeping in. Maybe the storm damaged it. Or, he trailed off, but I could guess what he was thinking. Hunters, I finished for him. As if summoned by the word, a sharp crack echoed through the forest, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. The bears flinched at the noise, but to our amazement, didn't run. Instead, they huddled closer together, the mothers positioning themselves protectively around their cubs. Hunters, Daniel confirmed grimly, and out of season, too. A surge of anger coursed through me, hot and fierce. Hunting season had ended weeks ago. Anyone shooting at bears now, especially mothers with cubs, was not only breaking the law, but also violating the unspoken code of ethics that govern life in these woods. I looked down at Lily, her blue eyes wide and trusting, then back at the bear family seeking shelter at our doorstep. In that moment, the connection I felt transcended species. We were all mothers, all vulnerable in our own ways. We can't just leave them out there, I said, my voice firm with resolve. Daniel stared at me incredulously. What exactly are you suggesting, that we invite 4 bears into our home? With our baby? I shook my head, my mind racing. Not into the house, but the storage shed. It's insulated, empty except for some tools. They could shelter there until the storm passes. Emma, this is crazy, Daniel protested, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was a kind man, a man who respected nature and all its creatures. But he was also a father with a family to protect. We don't know why they're here or what they might do. Another gunshot rang out, closer this time. The larger mother bear rose to her feet, facing the direction of the sound. She let out a low, warning growl, then turned back to the cabin. What happened next left both Daniel and me speechless. The bear approached the door again, but this time, she gently pushed one of her cubs forward with her nose. The cub stumbled through the snow until it was pressed against our cabin door. Then, the bear did something that defied everything we thought we knew about wild animals. She bowed her head, almost in supplication, and looked directly at the window where I stood with Lily. She's begging, I whispered, my voice filled with awe and a strange, overwhelming emotion. Daniel, she's asking us to help her babies. Daniel was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving from the bears to Lily and back again. Then he sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging as if under a great weight. "The shed has a separate entrance from the back," he said slowly. "I could lead them around, open the door, and let them in without getting too close." Relief and gratitude flooded through me. I reached out, touching his arm gently. "Thank you," I said softly. "But you and Lily stay inside with the doors locked," he insisted, his eyes serious. "If anything goes wrong, anything at all, you call the ranger station and get out through the back. Promise me, Emma." I nodded, though something deep inside told me I had nothing to fear from these bears. As Daniel prepared to go outside, strapping on a headlamp and pulling on his thickest gloves, I returned to the window. The bears were still waiting, their bodies gradually being covered by the falling snow. The injured cub had curled up against its mother, clearly in pain. The other two cubs shivered visibly. Time was running out for them. As Daniel unlocked the back door, Lily cooed softly in my arms. Outside, the larger mother bear lifted her head as if she could hear the baby's sounds even through the cabin walls. Our eyes met through the glass. A human mother and a bear mother. And in that moment, I felt a connection that transcended species. We were both simply mothers, trying to protect our young against a world full of dangers. "Be careful," I called to Daniel as he stepped outside into the swirling snow. What neither of us realized was that our act of compassion was about to change our lives forever, in ways we could never have imagined. Daniel moved carefully around the side of the cabin, his boots crunching in the deep snow. The wind had picked up again, biting at his exposed face and driving icy particles into his eyes. He kept one hand on the rough wooden wall of the cabin for guidance as he made his way toward the front, where the bears waited. When he rounded the corner, he froze, his breath catching in his throat. Reading about bears was one thing, seeing them from the safety of a window was another, but standing less than 20 feet from two full-grown mother bears and their cubs sent a primal fear coursing through Daniel's body. Every instinct screamed at him to run back inside, to lock the door and wait for the danger to pass. But he stood his ground, remembering the look in Emma's eyes, the conviction in her voice. If she could be brave enough to suggest this, he could be brave enough to see it through. The larger bear noticed him immediately. She rose slightly, her massive form even more imposing up close. Her nostrils flared as she caught his scent, and Daniel could see the intelligence in her dark eyes as they locked onto his. He held his breath, knowing that one wrong move could trigger a defensive attack. "Easy," he whispered, though whether to himself or the bear he wasn't sure. "I'm here to help." To his amazement, the bear lowered herself back down. The second, smaller bear remained huddled protectively over her injured cub, watching Daniel with equal intensity. He could see now that the cub's paw was swollen, possibly broken. The sight tugged at his heart, reminding him of the time he had found an injured fox kid and nursed it back to health. Daniel took a slow step forward, then another. He pointed toward the back of the property where the storage shed stood. "This way," he said, knowing they couldn't understand his words, but hoping his gestures might communicate his intentions. The larger bear tilted her head, an almost human-like expression of curiosity on her face. Then she looked back at her cubs who were huddled together, shivering in the cold. After what seemed like an eternity, she nudged them gently with her nose, urging them to stand. The injured cub of the smaller bear struggled to its feet, letting out a soft whimper of pain. "Come on," Daniel encouraged, taking another cautious step toward the shed. "It's not far, you'll be safe there." To his astonishment, the bears began to follow him. They didn't charge, didn't threaten, but walked slowly through the snow, the mothers keeping their cubs between them as they moved. Daniel led them around the cabin, constantly glancing back to make sure they were still following and not getting too close. The surreal nature of the situation wasn't lost on him. Here he was, leading a group of bears through his backyard as casually as if they were a group of lost hikers. Inside the cabin, I watched through the kitchen window, Lily clutched tightly to my chest. My heart pounded as I saw my husband guiding 4 bears through our property. It was a scene I never could have imagined, yet it was unfolding before my eyes. Part of me wanted to rush out and join them, to help in some way. But I knew I had to stay put. Lily's safety came first. Daniel reached the shed and fumbled with the keys, his fingers stiff from cold. The bear stopped several yards away, waiting patiently. He finally got the door open and stepped aside, gesturing toward the entrance. The larger bear approached first, her movements cautious but not fearful. She poked her head inside the shed, examining the space. After a moment, seemingly satisfied with what she found, she entered. Her cubs followed closely, their small forms disappearing into the shadows of the shed. The smaller bear hesitated, torn between the safety offered by the human structure and her instinctive wariness. Her injured cub pressed against her leg, trembling from cold and pain. "It's okay," Daniel said softly, his voice carrying on the still air. "You're safe here. We won't hurt you." As if understanding his words, the bear finally made her decision. She gently nudged her cub forward, guiding it into the shed. Once they were all inside, Daniel closed the door part way, leaving it open just enough that they wouldn't feel trapped, but closed enough to provide shelter from the relentless storm. He hurried back to the cabin, half expecting to hear the sounds of the shed being torn apart. Daniel hurried back to the cabin, half expecting to hear the sounds of the shed being torn apart. Instead, there was only silence, broken occasionally by the howling wind. As he stamped the snow from his boots in the entryway, I rushed to meet him, Lily still cradled in my arms. "They went in?" I asked, incredulously. Daniel nodded, still not quite believing it himself, like they knew exactly what I was offering. "It's uncanny, Emma." I set Lily down in her bassinet and began gathering supplies, old blankets, a container of water, and some dried berries we'd collected in the fall. "They must be hungry and thirsty," I explained, seeing Daniel's questioning look. "And cold. We can't just leave them like that." "Emma, you're not going out there," he said firmly, placing a hand on my arm. I held up a small first aid kit. "The little one is hurt. I've treated injured animals before, Daniel. You know that." Before we'd moved to the cabin, I had worked as a wildlife rehabilitation specialist. I'd handled injured foxes, eagles, even a young wolf once, but bears were different, and we both knew it. "These aren't raccoons or deer," he reminded me gently. "They're apex predators, Emma." I placed my hand on his chest, feeling his rapid heartbeat. "They're mothers, Daniel, just like me. They need help or they wouldn't be here." Before he could argue further, another series of gunshots echoed through the forest, much closer now. Lily startled at the noise, beginning to cry. I picked her up, soothing her gently. "Those hunters are getting closer," Daniel said grimly. "If they find bears on our property," my face hardened with resolve, "then we need to protect them. All of them." This time, Daniel didn't object when I bundled up and prepared a bag of supplies. He simply grabbed his rifle, not to use against the bears, but to warn off any hunters who might come too close. Together we made our way to the shed, me carrying Lily strapped to my chest under my coat. The baby had settled, seemingly lulled by the gentle sway of my walk. Daniel opened the shed door slowly. Inside, the bears had arranged themselves in the corner furthest from the door. The mothers sat alert, watching us warily, while the cubs huddled between them for warmth. The injured cub licked at its paw, its small face contorted in pain. "Stay behind me," Daniel whispered, entering first. The larger bear made a low sound in her throat, not quite a growl but a warning. Daniel stopped, holding up his empty hands to show he meant no harm. I peered around him, my breath catching at the sight of these magnificent creatures up close. Slowly, deliberately, I unzipped my coat just enough to reveal Lily's face. The baby blinked in the dim light, her tiny features scrunching up as she yawned. The effect on the bears was immediate and astonishing. The larger mother's posture relaxed visibly, her eyes fixed on the human infant. She made that same moaning sound we had heard earlier, a sound that now, hearing it up close, reminded me, eerily, of how mother bears called to their cubs. "She recognizes what Lily is," I whispered in wonder. "She knows I'm a mother, too." Taking advantage of the moment, I carefully set down the supplies I'd brought. I opened the container of water and placed it within reach of the bears, then scattered the dried berries nearby. Finally, I set down the blankets, pushing them toward the animals with my foot. The mothers watched, but made no move toward the offerings. The injured cub whimpered again, drawing my attention. "I need to look at that paw," I said softly to Daniel. He tensed beside me. "Emma, no, it's too dangerous." But I was already moving forward, slowly and steadily. The bear mothers watched me approach, their eyes intelligent and assessing. I stopped a few feet away from the injured cub, then lowered myself to sit cross-legged on the cold floor. "It's okay," I murmured, not sure if I was reassuring the bears or myself. "I want to help." To our amazement, the smaller mother bear gently nudged her cub toward me. The little one limped forward, its dark eyes wide with pain and fear. With trembling hands, I opened the first aid kit and began to examine the injured paw. As I worked, cleaning and bandaging the wound as best I could, I felt a warm presence beside me. The larger mother bear had moved closer, watching intently. When I finished, she leaned forward and gently licked the bandage, then looked at me with what I could only describe as gratitude. We spent the next hour in that shed, tending to the bears, offering food and water, and simply being present. As the night wore on, the gunshots faded into the distance, and the storm began to abate. Just before dawn, we heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Daniel tensed, raising his rifle, but I placed a hand on his arm. "Wait," I said, peering out the small window. To our relief, it wasn't hunters, but a team from the Wildlife Service. Word of the out-of-season hunting had reached them, and they had come to investigate. When they saw the bears in our shed, they were astounded. In the days that followed, our story spread. The injured cub was taken for proper medical care, while the other bears were relocated to a safer part of the forest. But they didn't go far. Over the years, we would often spot them at the edge of our property, a reminder of that extraordinary night. Our act of compassion had not only saved these bears, but had also sparked a renewed effort for wildlife conservation in the area. Stricter anti-poaching measures were implemented, and a new wildlife corridor was established to protect bear habitats. As for us, that night changed everything. It deepened our connection to the land and its creatures, and it taught us a profound lesson about empathy that transcends species. Lily grew up with a unique understanding of and respect for wildlife, inspired by the night her parents sheltered bears. Years later, as I watched Lily, now a budding wildlife biologist working to protect the very forest that once sheltered us all, I'm reminded of that snowy night when we opened our door to unexpected guests. In helping them, we found a deeper understanding of our place in the natural world, not as conquerors, but as caretakers, all of us connected in the great web of life.